Hi, welcome in. We're just going to go over the last few seasons of my garden and see how things have changed. Starting off the season here, all that I did because I didn't want to spend much money at all is I just cut the grass and then pulled up a lot of the weeds within the areas I had designated for plants, just to make some form of a bed, and then I planted straight into those. These are some of the plants that I had planted. These are mammoth sunflowers. We have some cucumbers, which are lemon cucumbers. We planted some jalapeno plants. These are the jalapeno plants. And then additionally, these were the cherry tomato plants next to the trellis. And this is just an overview of all of that. There is other things in here. I did plant a hybrid mini corn, a mini watermelon, a ton of rainbow carrots, and there's also some Roma tomatoes along that trellis. I did spend time and fertilize these with a liquid fertilizer that I just made out of veggie scraps that I had boiled, and then I put water in it to dilute it, and then just put it all over these vegetables. I like to call that fertilizer garden tea, so I'll definitely be going over that at a later date in a later video. This is later in the season, towards the end of the summer when everything had grown in. There was a lot of issues I found with this, mainly because the grass overgrew so much and I had to constantly maintain it, which was really difficult for me, especially since I made the beds kind of close together. I couldn't really get the lawnmower through there. So that was like a big issue I had. And because it was in the ground also, and there wasn't very good drainage. So I had started making plans to try to change that for the next season. This was how tall the mammoth sunflowers got. They were around 8 to 10 feet tall. I also did end up using a store pallet to make this little strawberry holder that I had screwed into the fence. This did not end up working very well. The strawberries had a really hard time staying hydrated with the hotter summers, and they ended up, especially the ones on top, just drying out and burnt. So that did not work, and I did end up just taking it down and getting rid of it the following year. This is where we get into just a harvest. I had a good amount of these rainbow carrots, a bunch of lemon cucumbers, cherry tomatoes, jalapenos that came out of the garden. I'd say it was pretty good. We had a ton of the lemon cucumbers and the carrots. Here this was the mammoth sunflower. I did take too long to take it down, so the birds had eaten a lot of it. This was the first time I grew a mammoth sunflower, so I didn't know when the seeds would be ready until I looked it up way too late, after the birds had already eaten almost like a whole flower worth of seeds. I did manage to grow some of these little, I believe they're crimson sweet watermelons, but I didn't get to eat them because, as you'll see in a little bit, I ended up taking down the fence to mow down the rest of the garden because it was at the end of its life right now. This is into late summer, early fall, when I was ready to be done, and I had started pulling things up and cleaning the area out. So my dog ended up chewing up these watermelons, so I did not get to even try them, which this would be the first time I grew those. These little guys were the highlight of my entire summer. They were so fun to watch. I seen big ones, and then I seen their little babies coming through, which was so much fun. These are the I think they're called anole or anole lizards. And they're plentiful here where I live, but this was the first year I lived here, so they were just so fun to watch and to see, and I just loved having them. This is the end of the year when I started to cut down all the grass. I pulled up all the tomatoes, I pulled up the trellises, I left the jalapenos and the cucumbers, and there was the watermelons there on the left floor that I ended up leaving for a little bit longer, but those got pulled out too. And then the snow came, and I did what most gardeners do when the winter comes and there's no garden to tend to. I went seed shopping. After such a fun year in the garden, I committed myself to buying this large pack of seeds. This was just a bunch of different garden seeds. This is what I found online. This is what I paid for it back then. And then I also got a pack of this herb start set. Had 20 different herbs in it, and that's what I ended up planting the next year. Here's the start to the next garden season of 2023. I had started a ton of seeds, and then disaster struck because my dogs destroyed a large amount of them. So, insert comes the fence. I needed the fence, or they would destroy it again. I was happy to see that the lizards returned to the garden. I was hoping they would. I didn't know whether or not they were going to. These were my cucumber plants that I had started in grow bags, and unfortunately they did not make it through the season. I ended up having to pull them, and I didn't have any cucumbers for that whole season, which was so disappointing. I was working part-time at this time, so I didn't have much time to put into things. I did end up redoing this front garden area, pulling up all the weeds, and this is where I put all of my herbs. I had started a ton of herbs. There's chives, sweet basil, lemon basil, thyme, parsley, rosemary in here. There's sage and dill all growing in here. At this point, it was finally time for me to start working on this main garden. I felt extremely overwhelmed by this, so I just had to take it in sections. I did things probably out of order, and I started off this garden season very late in terms of actually putting things in the ground. As you can see, this time when I started working on this garden project to get these beds in there, which I had planned in advance, it was already the beginning of June, so it was really late, but I did have a lot of starts planted into cups and ready to go in the ground. Phase 1, as you can see, I started laying down cardboard all over, and that was because I wanted to kill off the grass and the weeds, because that was something in the last garden that was very frustrating to me. And then after that, I had gone in to buy the lumber to start building the beds. And they're just they're 10-foot 2x6s that I had built these beds out of, and then I just used some 3-inch deck screws to keep them together. Now, I did not have a great way to transport this lumber. I ended up using my husband's car, which, as you can see, is pretty dinged up already. It's probably, a lot of it is probably my fault. Some of it might have been his, but that is why I really need my own car that's suitable for utility purposes. But I made it work nonetheless because that was something I just had to get done. I worked on building the beds here. I had measured out, and this is how I decided to set them up because I wanted to keep the greenhouse there in the corner. I ultimately ended up moving it out of the way because I wanted some vining plants to just have that space to grow into. But I did kind of do this out of order in a way. I kept running out of cardboard, I kept running out of things I needed, so I just slowly worked my way from the back to the front. And then after I had finished the boxes, I got them mostly filled in. I got the wood chips onto the floor. I ended up working on building a fence frame out of wood. The fence I did make out of treated wood, whereas the boxes I had put the vegetables in, I made it with non-treated wood, just because that's the way that I have heard that is best. You don't want to use treated wood for your vegetable garden, but I did want to put treated wood up onto the fence so that that would just stay looking nice. I started by making the left and right panel, and I stapled the welded wire garden fence. It was 28 inches tall. It was the fence I had before. I just took that and I stapled it to the wood frames, and then I built a gate to open and shut so I'd have access and my dog and nobody else could get in. I did use, I believe they were 3 or 4 foot U-posts to secure these panels to stand upright, which they just hammered into the floor. And then I just used 2-inch exterior screws to hold those onto the fence, so they're just propped into the floor. And if needed, they'll be really easy to pull back out of the ground so that this can all get taken down quickly. This was how it was looking after probably a couple of weeks. Everything was growing in nicely. This summer was extremely hot, so unfortunately there wasn't much fruiting or flowering happening. It was just a ton of greenery that was growing because the weather was, I think it hit like 115 at some point, so it was really, really hot. And so it was really struggling, and because I got these starts in so late, it was just not looking so good. Right here in this area, I did put down some vining small watermelons, some of those crimson sweet watermelons, because I had the desired, the plan was for me to put in an arch trellis to have these grow up onto, which I did eventually, but it was definitely really late. I ended up having to buy or to rent a truck from Home Depot, which I went to go pick up these large 16-foot cattle panels, and then I bought some U-posts again. They were, I think, 6 to 8 feet, somewhere in there, U-posts that I hammered into the ground with a mallet, about 2 feet down, so they're very sturdy and firm, and then I attached a kettle panel to it, which I'll show you the process of that later. This is what it ended up looking like with the cattle panel all in place, the arch was all in place, and this was the little watermelons and cantaloupes growing up onto the arch. And then I ended up fertilizing this garden with a high potassium fertilizer, which is why there's some flowers that came in. They were really struggling for any produce or any flowers to come in. But I did end up eventually getting some squash, just seeds thrown in the ground just to kind of see what would happen. I never grew them, so I wanted to try them, but they didn't produce anything. I did end up getting some cantaloupes, but they were not fully ripened because we had an aphid outbreak over this arch, which just sucked the nutrition out of it, so it just looks pretty and green, but really didn't get anything off of it. And then we ended up getting a good amount of eggplant, which was good. I got some eggplant, was able to make some good stuff out of. Made a joke and put them inside of the egg carton because I thought that was so funny that there was eggplants in the egg carton. And then I baked them up in the oven, and I made an eggplant spread with it that we ate with some homemade bread, which was delicious. This was some watermelon, and I think I put some pumpkin in that back corner that vined out that were really pretty. But again, we did not end up getting any harvest off of them, but it's very green and beautiful. This is how the overview of the garden looked at the end of the year. Lots of green, a little bit of flowers because I fertilized, but very little actual harvest was out of this garden. And then this year came to an end, and we ended up pulling off all the green little large cherry tomatoes off the vine and used that to make some really delicious tomato soup, and we cut our flowers, and then we buttoned up the garden for the year and put some leaves on it, and that was the end of this year. It was important to me this year because I already had all the beds built, to get ahead of everything and to get everything in the ground at a decent time. So I got this garden planted at a good time. I ended up building a secondary bed dedicated to cucumbers was my goal, which is this one here with the fence. And then I bought some zucchini seeds, and I also bought some morning glory seeds for 4 different colors morning glories. So hopefully those will grow in. I have those all along the fence. I was gifted this succulents that I also added in the garden just for fun. This is current day garden of spring 2024 as of this video. I think there's a couple things that have changed, but we'll have more tours in the future. This, I'm going to go into a more in-depth tour of this year's garden and what it has in it and all the things that I have started, and we'll have to see how it goes. I'm going to go ahead and end this video here, and in the next video we'll have a more in-depth tour and also go over how I assembled and built the trellis arch. Thank you for watching, and I hope you tune back in for the next video. See you soon.